Hello, my name is Peter Pilgrim, and I am the founder and organizer of the Java Web Users Group in the UK. We've been holding these meetings every 2 months bi-monthly, and we have held recently our 15th meeting at the Oracle City of London offices in Moorgate. I presented a piece on my experiences with Ajax, and you'll find that in part 1 of the videos. In part 2 of the videos, Duncan Mills of Oracle, who is a Java Evangelist who provided the venue, thanks very much kindly, presents on JSF Security. And for the first time, we have Emmanuel Okoye, who's presenting on the Rifer framework. I hope you find these presentations useful. Please visit www.javawug.com or send me an email at peterp@xenonique.co.uk. Thank you very much and enjoy these videos. Thank you.
I just threw this one into the balance because we were trying to think of things to talk about today. As it happens, we had a good discussion on Ajax, so that's actually probably gone all evening on that. But I put this one out there just because it's an area of interest to me. I'm always interested in what other people are doing in the security area. So I do a lot of work with Java Server Faces. Traditionally I did a lot with struts, which is where I kind of got involved with this group a few years back. But now I tend to do more framework stuff and JSF stuff. And as part of that, I've been working on an open source project for adding some security infrastructure into JSF. It's currently a problem area, but we'll kind of come into that. So my day job is working on the JDeveloper IDE for Oracle, based out of our headquarters in California. Just happen to live here, but I work out of that group. So I do a mix of evangelism work, i.e. going around telling everyone how wonderful Java is, and then also product design work on the IDE itself. So this quickie is just based around a very small premise. I don't know how many of you have used JSF, but I think the problems are actually fairly similar on other frameworks as well. Not so much struts, because struts has kind of addressed this problem to a large extent. When using JSF as it stands today, it wasn't really designed with any kind of security in mind. It's a conspicuous gap in the specification. And it has the problem that basically works around not doing redirects. So we end up with just, in most cases, a single URL that encapsulates the whole application, which of course has other issues like bookmarking and so on. It of course makes it totally useless when it comes to trying to use container managed security as a way of protecting URLs, because there's only one URL, so you can't put any kind of granularity in there. So there are issues like that to worry about. There are also a lot of issues with mixing and matching JSF components with, if you like, the container-generated infrastructure that you'll have for custom logon pages or indeed error pages. And there are a lot of restrictions there, just to do with the way that JSF and JSP work together currently. That's something that's been addressed in the next version of JSF. So there's kind of all these problems had kind of raised a bit of interest in my mind as how we could do security a bit better. Now obviously there are other solutions to this whole thing. We can use filtering techniques, we can use whole frameworks like a CG to handle security for us. But it always seemed to me a bit of a shame that the baseline security that all containers have to provide as part of the specification essentially doesn't really work with Faces as a technology. So as I said, it's been something that's been conspicuously absent. The only place where any thought at all has gone into security, I feel, is in the MyFaces component sets. The Apache MyFaces project have at least recognized that people are quite interested sometimes in securing portions of the page based on the user role. Imagine that. So they have put kind of role attributes into their components, or some of the components. So we can very simply say, okay, this panel or this tree is only visible or is read-only based on these role, the role from the container. But there's no concept of anything like instructs. We have the ability to associate, a role with an action or a set of roles with an action. So the framework's handling that. Even if the URL doesn't change, it doesn't matter because the framework's saying, you're a manager, you can't go here. None of that's in JSF. So that in mind, I've been trying in a few sample applications I've been writing to work out what the best way of living with the constraint of trying to use container security in JSF is. And I come to several conclusions, one of which is it's not even worth trying to mix and match kind of security context information like a custom logging form on a page with other JSF content. It just doesn't really work. You can just about get away with building a custom logging form from JSF if it's the right component set. But you certainly can't kind of have a typical application with a little log-on box in the corner that when you fill it in, extra stuff happens. That ain't going to work. I went through. There are various ways of embedding that kind of content within the JSF page using the verbatim tag, but that wasn't really on. So at the moment, I've kind of come down to the conclusion the best way is, first of all, you have to use a custom login form to contain. You can't rely on the browser to generate its own basic authentication dialog, because it will have the unfortunate effect of never bothering to change your credentials on the server. Which is rather embarrassing if you log out and then log in again as someone else with different privileges and you still get back to where you should have gone. That's just another broader issue with container security. So we've got this problem of login forms are bad. The other big glaring hole I always found in JSF was that there was no simple way to get hold of security information. I mean, yes, you can go to the request and say, here's user enroll, obviously. And there's kind of one shortcut to that through the JSF external context. But there's no way within the user interface, within the expression language that JSF provides to articulate this stuff. So you have to go away and start to think about how within the context of the way I work with JSF, and I don't know if you're familiar with JSF, but kind of all data access is generally done through expression language. So within my page, I have a value of a component which is bound to an expression. And that expression is mapped through an inversion control principle to some managed beam in the background. So if I want to have expression access to a bit of security information, like what role am I in, what's my principal name, the only way I can do that is to start writing code to wrap this stuff up and expose it or something. So we've gone through various iterations on this, like, okay, I can have a simple user info beam that exposes my principal name as just an attribute, so I can then use an expression, hash user info dot name, and I get that information. Likewise, I could kind of iterate through the known roles and expose the roles that this user is in as a hash map, and again, that's then accessible through EL using dot notation or using the square bracket accessory notation. All these things felt really crappy, to tell the truth, because every application needs this stuff. It seemed crazy how to write each. Now, one of the approaches we thought about early on was, well, we could build some components that did this. And I kind of thought about this for a while and then discarded it. But then today, while Googling for something totally different, I came across this reference. Actually, no, it wasn't. It was on the JSF MyFaces user list, I think. It was some random email that happened to catch my eye. And this guy was very proud of the fact that he's built some components to do a CG integration. So you have something like this. You have a JSF component tag with an attribute giving a list of roles or a single role. And then based on that, I render the contents of that tag. So I've now engaged in a long blog argument with them about how bad this is as an approach. Because of course, though it's very nice as a simple approach to hiding a whole segment of the page, it's going to get needlessly complicated if you have, say, 15 different fields to hide and they're not all together in a block. You have to have 15 wrapper fields. Or, yes, I can hide what's inside this thing, but can I say disable what's inside this thing? Can I use this information about the user in some kind of expression? So, for instance, if you're a customer role and the status of the record is new, then yes, you can update this field. Otherwise, you can't. That's something you just can't do using this tag approach. Which is why I've kind of thrown it out the window a while back. But it was interesting to see someone kind of going through the process of building this stuff. So we'll see what he comes back with tomorrow. I'm sure he's going to be very upset with me. But never mind, there's some references to his stuff. So to solve this problem, what we came up with was to try and do things the JSF way, which is expression language. So security information is metadata. All other metadata in Faces is exposed through EL, so it seems sensible to expose security attributes through EL as well. And fortunately, JSF being a jolly well architected framework, it allows you to do things like extend the EL to add your own resolution in there. And this is how things like Spring and JSF integration work. They extend the expression language. So that's what I did. And so we have this SourceForge project called JSF Security, which at the moment is quite limited, but it has a lot of potential further on. And the idea is we just extend the expression language, and I'll show you some examples in a second. But while I was doing that, it kind of occurred to me that it was actually much too restrictive to think about this as purely a container security thing. I actually don't like container security, but I had to use it in this case. So the thing is architected to be pluggable, so we can actually put Jazz into the back end or even flat files or CG. So we can have any kind of security provider at the back end implementing the right adapter. And then the UI expression will resolve correctly. So I can build the user interface with standard set of expressions, and then I've got a pluggable implementation at the back end to say, okay, on this site we're using Oracle's implementation of Jazz, so I need this adapter. On this site we're going to use a CG, so I'll use this adapter. So it's kind of the idea behind it. Now whether it's well architected, we'll see. So within JSF there are a whole bunch of standard scopes that can be used within an expression language. So we've got things like request scope, session scope, cookie, the standard expression language type things, the same as you'll have in JSTL. So what I've done then is to build a resolver which adds this security scope. So we've got our own namespace, so we're not treading on top of anyone else. And then within that namespace, there are several kind of fixed properties which an implementation of the backend may choose to implement or not. So pretty much any backend will probably implement the remote user, but only container security will perhaps implement auth type, digest, none, form, or whatever. So that's just part of the pluggability mechanisms to say what you support. And then the big problem I had was the fact that expression language in JSF 1.1 and indeed in JSP 2.0 has no way of formally executing methods. Everything you do in EL, like this dot notation, under the covers is calling either a getter, so in this case something dot get auth type, or it's looking up in a hash map or some kind of map implementation doing a get with this auth type as a key. There's no nice way of doing, just calling a function with some arguments. So I flagrantly abused the expression language syntax to actually allow this, using this kind of pseudo hash map lookup, where we can provide a comma-separated list of roles, and then behind the scenes that all gets split up and passed through to the relevant functions. In JSF 1.2 and whatever version of JSP comes along next, there are the capabilities to actually physically call functions properly with expression language as a formal way of doing it, so I'll convert to that as I'm going.
JSTL.
So JST will have it as well.
Sorry, JSTL is not. You don't mean JSTL, you mean. Sorry.
Well, actually, we're talking about the same thing, really. I mean, JSTL is the JSP implementation of an expression language, right?
And then expression language.
And expression language.
But isn't there just one JSP expression language?
No, there's two.
Yeah.
There's several. Yes. So JSF expression language is slightly different from JSP expression language, JSTL. And then JSP.2.0 expression language, where you can embed the expressions directly without having to use tags, is the superset of the JSTL expression language. So one of the big changes in the version of JSF that's currently on spec review is a unification of expression languages. So there will be one expression, except Omni and all those other expression languages. But from the JSP JSF point of view, we will have unification. And function calling is one of those features that's kind of come out of it as well.
Oh, what about stacks?
That's interesting. I don't know. Yes, because at the moment, statics are okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Again, expose a fake hash map full of. Yeah. I don't know about that. Note to yourselves: expression language session.
Okay. Yeah.
At some point.
Okay.
That's an interesting area.
Yeah.
Given it's becoming such a prevalent way of gluing stuff together.
Well, that'd be interesting because I'm looking at WebWorks, so I will be looking at the Ognel.
It's Ognel, isn't it?
There's Ognel, which is
yet another expression.
Which is a more
another expression.
a more powerful version of expression. I think it's more powerful.
They're certainly very bullish about how much better it is.
Yeah, but
So expression language is a pretty good thing to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to our group before I take up your time. So at the moment I have frequently have used EL to get something that looks like a function, works like a function, smells like a function, and acts like a function, even though it doesn't have, the expression language doesn't support it. So we've got a series of very simple functions that I can use anywhere in JSF that I can use an expression, which is pretty much anywhere. So the render property, which controls whether a component is displayed or not. The read-only property, which controls whether it's read-only. You can also use expressions inside the value property. So I can do these complex things like, if I'm a manager, I see the full credit card number. If I'm anyone else, I see star, 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 and then the last three digits. I can express all of that in EL. Probably not the right place to put that particular logic, but I could do it. The way the thing works is we're just using the capabilities of JSF to add decorators to pretty much everything. So I can define my own property resolver and variable resolver. Those are for the two levels. We've got the top level is the property, the scope, if you like, which is really called scope resolver. And then the variable resolver is within that. So these just decorate the conventional resolvers. So if I'm not seeing an expression I'm interested in, then it gets passed back down the chain. And you may have a whole sequence of resolvers in the chain. So I may say have my resolver, then the spring resolver, then the base JSF resolver. Whatever it happens to be. And the nice thing is, in terms of installation, the packaging mechanism of JSF means that if I have my own JSF faces config file with this in it, in a jar file in my webinflib directory, the punter who's consuming this in their application doesn't have to make any change at all. This kind of is auto-registering, auto-bootstrapped. So when Faces starts up, it'll say, there's a jar file in the webinf. I'll just see if there's a Faces config in here. Oh, yes, there is. oh, let's see if there's something I could do with that. And it'll find out, oh, you've got a few decorators here, I'll plug them into my command chain. So it becomes a zero install thing. Drop the jar file in and the expressions are available. So there's no configuration steps, unless you want to start controlling which resolve is used. So we have this concept of a pluggable resolver, and that's just defined through an init parameter at the moment, and defaults to container security mainly because I haven't written the others yet. And then there's all sorts of infrastructure which I won't go into for defining how you can build your own resolvers that plug in at the back end and be switched to this thing. And so that's what we're working on at the moment. So I'm working on this with one of my colleagues from Germany. And he's a bit of a jazz head, knows all of this stuff. So he's working on the jazz implementation at the moment. And we're also putting together the next phase, which is in some ways the most important phase. All we've got so far is something that will allow me to use expressions inside my components, which is great, very useful, but it doesn't help me with protecting pages and getting around the whole thing of, if I go to this particular page of my application, that's only available to certain roles. So that's the current phase we're working on at the moment, is to put in navigation handlers that will allow me to define metadata which will allow me to assign roles to particular actions within the application. So going back to what we have in structs with the simple role attribute on the action. So that's what we've currently, in fact, is now working. I haven't got it running on this machine yet, but we've got that implementation in place. And that'll be the next thing that goes out along with the Jazz implementation of the back end. What I'm also trying to do, perhaps not quite the right way of doing it, but this guy's been doing the CG stuff. Maybe I can talk him into doing the CG stuff. But he won't like me now, so maybe not possible. And then there's a few other things like can we integrate with facelets so we can start to secure regions of pages in the same way. That I think will actually be fairly simple. And can we start to do more complex security requirements, like not only role-based but also time-based or access-based security as well. I'm logging in from within this IP address range, so it's okay, otherwise no way, that kind of stuff. But that's kind of way out. It's on the nice-to-have list, but we'll get the basics with it. I don't really want to build another complete security infrastructure. I'd rather plug that from somewhere else. Anyway, there we are. Short and sweet, as I said. I can show you this very, very quickly. Mainly because I've got the application here. So this is just one of my demo applications. So just running within the OC4J container from JDeveloper. Not running anything you like. Tongue-in-cheek. So let's log in. So this is actually just an ordinary JSP that's defined as the login form for the applications. It's a form-based login using container security. Just happen to use a cookie to remember who I last logged in as. So I can't remember the password. Okay, so I've logged in as a manager. So this information here is coming from an expression. We go and look at that in the page definition. So you can see here there's just an expression in there, security scope.remote user. So that's resolved at design time. At runtime, sorry. And likewise, these menu tabs are protected in the same way, except rather than just being printing out, let's get to the property inspector. That one's available to everyone. That one's available. Here we are. So in this case, we're using, on the rendered property, we've got is user in role, and then the role in questions at the end. So we can just use EL nicely within the component attributes to secure up parts of the application in this case by limiting access to the menus. So if I then go to this User here, King, he's got access to everything. I can log out, so I'm just invalidating the session here. Log in as. Now I've lost the reference page of them, so it's just picked up those constraints. We can go on as this user. I don't see some of the buttons up here that I get with the other users. This is an Ajax table. Just if you're interested. That's all acting. This area here is just refreshed rather than the whole page. Okay, that's me done. Give you 5 minutes. Happy with that.
So speed coding and speech presenting.